Welcome again, viewers, to the series of discussions around the economic stages of early Indian history. And in our previous interactions, we have spoken of different stages leading up to the Mauryan times, and this particular lecture, alongside the earlier part of it, is about the post-Mauryan times. Post-Mauryan times could be understood with reference to the timeline of, say, 200 BCE to around 300 CE. So it is these 500 years, 400 years that we are talking about after the decline of the Mauryas to up to the beginning of the Gupta period around 320 CE. In the earlier part of this post-Mauryan stage of economic changes or development, we discussed that quite unlike the Mauryan economy or popular understanding, mainstream understanding of Mauryan economy, the post-Mauryan economy seems to be characterized by smaller farms as compared to state-controlled big huge farms worked upon by the hired laborers and slaves and so forth, everything happening at the behest of the state and state superintendents, officials controlling every aspect of economic activity. That seems to have eased in the post-Mauryan times. This is what the sources reveal. And it seems that there is more effort at the level of individuals and civil level where things are happening, although the trend of constantly augmenting the agrarian frontiers is continuing unabated even in the post-Mauryan times. Although we don't anymore see the overwhelming presence of the state in getting it done, rather it is at the behest of civil efforts, at the behest of local individual efforts that these things are happening. And we, in the earlier discussion, we took examples from Shak rulers, from Satavahan rulers also, to make sense of what we are talking about in terms of existing evidence. We also discussed that there are some references to taxes. For example, Rudradaman, the Shak ruler, is getting a water reservoir made or repaired in Saurashtra area, and for that he is not mounting any extra tax on his subjects. So taxes like pranay or other taxes, which could be taxes on fruits and other products, agricultural products, they are not exacted because of this construction of a lake. Now, historians have made some sense out of it. One interpretation is that people are no more, or the state is no more exacting that much of taxes as it did in the Mauryan times. The other could be that, the total number of emergency taxes actually are rising, because pranay and the tax on fruits and vegetables, they are not referred to as emergency tax in the Mauryan period. So interpretation could be whatever, and we don't know with exactitude what the situation might be, but the overall trend seems to be that there is some easing of the total incidence of tax and even rates during the post-Mauryan period as compared to the period preceding it, that is Mauryan period. So continuing our discussion on this, we don't know whether the peasants were relieved of these oppressive taxes during the period, or they go on to become additional emergency taxes during the period. Only slaves and hired laborers could be forced to work on state farms during the Mauryan period, while even the peasants could be burdened with forced labor now. So this is yet another interpretation that we can do for this particular evidence. moving away from what the Kushan rulers or Shaka rulers did in the western and northwestern part of India, if we look at the introduction of Akshanivi system of land tenure, which means perpetual endowment of land revenues, generally this arrangement is spoken of in the Gupta context, in the Gupta period context, but it seems that it would have begun in the Kushan rule itself. Although generally the understanding is that it acquired a popular form. This tenurial arrangement acquired a popular form during the Gupta period, particularly in Bengal, where people bought land and then gave away lands to various donies under this arrangement, perpetual kind of endowment in terms of land revenue. However, the law books, if you look at the literary sources, contemporary literary sources, the law books of Manu provide for assignment of land to revenue officials who are in charge of 1, 10, 20, 100 and even 1,000 villages. So this is a literary reference, all right, but it seems unlikely that it was put to practice in real sense of the term. Inscriptional evidence, as I told you, comes of land grant only from the Satavahan period, not prior to that. So maybe that this convention was there, this idea was there, but we don't have any concrete evidence that it was put into practice as such. So that's the thing, that revenue officials perhaps were paid in cash and not in terms of land grants, at least up to this period, in the post-Mauryan period. From the Gupta period or the later Gupta period, yes, it could have begun as a practice, it could have become normative, but till around this time, people knew of it, people wrote about it, but it was perhaps not put into practice on any significant scale. Yet another facet of our discussion on economy of the postmodern period could then be the size of the plots. What is the normative size of the plots that we are talking about in terms of agriculture and land grants and so forth? So in the Western Deccan, some inscriptions do refer to the fields of say 2, 3, 4, 8, 9, 20 and even 26 nivartanas. Now, nivartana is a unit of land measurement current at this point of time, and that is calculated to be the equivalent, one nivartana is equivalent to 1.5 acres. So we have one reference to a grant of 100 nivartanas of land of a royal field. So it's a huge piece of land that we are talking about, and again it is a royal field. So earlier the way we spoke of smaller farms characterizing the period, well, we should make some exception that state is not altogether gone in terms of economic management and land ownership and so forth. In North India, there is not much evidence of royal management or extension of royal control into agriculture, except stray references by the Kalinga ruler Kharvel, who claims to have carried out extension of an old canal, probably for irrigation purpose. But looking at the sources in general, it seems that in North India, the usual practice of irrigation was carried out by using tanks and wells in the vicinity of smaller plots, and the sheer fact that tanks and wells were used by individuals to irrigate their fields, that also tells us about the smaller dimension of plots as being the order of the day. So that's the scenario that we get related to the agriculture as such in the post-modern period. If we take this discussion away from agriculture and think of arts and crafts, well, state control over arts and crafts activities again seem to be almost negligible, though the number of arts and crafts activities registered an unprecedented growth as compared to what it is mentioned in earlier Buddhist texts and Kautilya's Arthashastra belonging to the Mauryan period and so forth. So, what we are saying here is that the post-Mauryan times saw an unprecedented expansion in arts and crafts activities, but again, it is outside the ambit of state control and management that these developments are happening. We no more find a battery of state officials or managers supervising it for revenue purpose the way they used to be doing during the Mauryan period. So, if we look at some of the sources, say Digha Nikaya, we are told of nearly 24 trades. If you look at Mahavatsu, it talks of 36 kinds of workers living in Rajgrih itself. Milind Panho talks of 75 occupations, different occupations, and this ranged across so many activities. So again, the point that we are making here is that even outside agriculture, in the domain of arts and crafts, the trend holds. It is further multiplication, diversification, division of labor that's very much evident happening in the post-Mauryan period, although the state does not seem to be the prime mover of this transformation or this change or this accelerated change towards urbanization, arts, crafts, or maximization of agrarian areas and so forth. So the overriding presence of the state is no more there the way we compare it with the Mauryan times. So in terms of arts and other artisanal activities, we get to hear of iron making advancements. So advancements in the domain of iron making. We have Periplus talking about the iron made by Indian artisans and so forth, and these are references in very laudatory terms. Milind Panho also talks about the technology of iron making during the period where he says that the iron no more vomits the moisture, vomits the water contained in it on heating. So that is again indicative of a good quality iron that is manufactured by Indians at around this point of time. There are numerous references to other metals also. Outside iron making, there are several other metals that are worked upon by artisans during the period. Cloth making is alluded to, silk weaving, luxury articles, house construction items. Now, while it is very normal to find mud houses, and even the capital city of Pataliputra was surrounded by perhaps a wall made of wood. Now, it's very common to find in the post-Mauryan period houses made of burnt bricks. And even iron nails were used. So the quality, the construction items for house making, etc., also register an increase in material terms. So the quality of construction items are better as compared to the earlier period, so far as post-Mauryan period is concerned. So they seem to have progressed. Dyeing was a thriving craft in some South Indian towns, what in Hindi we called rangrez. So the technique of applying color over the textile, over the fabric. Oil pressers are mentioned, and one doesn't know whether oil wheel was also used in pressing oil so far as oil extraction is concerned. We get repeated references of weavers, goldsmiths, dyers, workers in metal and ivory, jewelers, sculptors, fishermen, perfumers who are referred to as gandhikas. They are all figuring as donors. So it seems that now it is not only the exclusive preserve of the royalty or some high officials or ministers to donate land, but now even common people, and the list is right before you. Even common people with modest social background, they are also appearing in inscriptions as donors. Of course, there are religious changes in the, Mauryan ideology and thinking that facilitates such grants and such donations as well. But the sheer fact that they are the ones, it is such kind of people who are emerging as donors, is important from economic point of view, because it tells us that this prosperity, this economic prosperity that we are talking of with reference to the postmodern period is seeping into the common population now, is becoming more democratized, so to say. More and more people are now the partners in this progress. Having spoken of agriculture, arts, artisanship, and so forth, let's also understand that this period is also known for tremendous urbanization and trade and commercial activities. And it is not only confined to overland trade, as all of us know about the Kushan period scenario in terms of economy, because they owed their allegiance from Central Asia, and a major part of the northwestern India and even North India up to Banaras was part of Kushan domain. So the Silk Route, which originated from China and connected the African coast and European coasts across the Mediterranean and across the Red Sea, that route, which was perhaps very lucrative for traders, actually was leveraged to good effect so far as Indians are concerned, because at this point of time in the postmodern period there were some disturbances in the politics of Central Asia, and therefore the traders using the Silk Route took a detour from Central Asia across the Indus into the Arabian Sea, and from there they took the maritime route across the Red Sea and reached the European coast or the African coast. So obviously Indians would have benefited out of this engagement with Silk Route during this period, overland also, because this was part of the Kushana Empire. But more importantly, the period is also known, postmodern period is also known for a very thriving Indo-Roman trade across the Arabian Sea, across the Red Sea. In fact, Periplus Maris Erythraei actually Erythraei is the Red Sea. We get a lot of evidence of how Europeans for the first time got to know about monsoon as the subcontinental feature in this area. They got to know about the seasonal wind, the direction of it, and used it to good effect to sail across, to transact with the Indian coast the peninsular coast, the eastern coast as well as the western coast. Earlier it was thought to be only western coast, but recent researchers have also emphasized that through inland trade and networks, even eastern coast was very much part of the Indo-Roman trade, and we have some ports that are referred to in these Greek sources. Arika Medu is giving us a lot of archaeological material related to Indo-Roman trade. As I said, monsoon as a phenomena is discovered during this period by the Europeans. Then Sangam literature, which is again belonging to this period, talks of twin capitals for the polities of Chol, Chera, Pandyas and so forth. Which goes on to show that despite very limited presence of the market in the Sangam period, in the post-modern period, in South India, they did understand the value of having one of their capitals on the sea coast, and this makes sense because of a very lucrative, thriving trade with the Roman world that was going on. Coinage, all of us have discussed earlier that the Kushanas and the Shakas and subsequently Guptas started issuing gold coins, round coins, coins with portraits, coins with legends and so forth, and it is the state now which goes on to acquire the monopoly of issuing and minting coins. So this also must have greatly enhanced the capacity of the Indian economy to deal with money and exchange and ease the entire process of transactions. So overall, this is the scenario that we get to see in the postmodern period in terms of the sectors of economy that we discussed with reference to agriculture, art and crafts, and also trade and urbanization, including that of coinage. Thank you.